Jim, the first time I met Jim was he was at a caucus event for the Democrats where I was running for delegate, and he was just talking to me. We were just talking. I had no idea he was an Olympia City Council member. And then all of a sudden he tells me, and I'm like, wow, our business just got broken into. And he's like, what? They didn't do anything? And very down to earth, which was pretty awesome to me. Every interaction I've ever had with Jim, I really appreciate his willingness to talk about things that other politicians won't talk about. He doesn't give me the impression that he's too big to talk about something. He's a very, very, very busy guy with all the things he does in our community. Is it the United Way that you also work for?
Yes, I work for United Ways of the Pacific Northwest, which is the trade association for United Way in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. So I do public policy training and technical assistance for 39 United Ways.
Geez, see, and plus you're already on city council, plus you're running for a campaign, and I don't know.
And I have a 4-year-old.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. That definitely doesn't make things any easier. Yeah, I just started my Washington State Treasurer campaign as a write-in. I'm actually going to be taking off here soon to go to try to get an LD endorsement. So I know how busy it is. I just do this and now that, and I also have a 10-year-old, and I don't have a 9-to-5. So it's crazy. I know you're a busy guy. I've been trying to get you on for a while, but glad we could finally connect. So one of the things we asked Kelsey last week, and I just want to make a disclaimer because at one point somebody said that you guys were opponents, which is not true. You're running for District 1 and District 2 for Thurston County Commissioner. A lot of people don't understand the importance of the commissioner position. And so if you could just explain to us what the Thurston County Commissioner's responsibilities are and kind of ways maybe you want to revolutionize the position.
Yeah, definitely. So I think the first thing to say is how important this year is for Thurston County. And if people don't know, county commissions are typically three members. In the bigger counties like King County, and where Seattle is, or Pierce County, where Tacoma is, they have a county charter and they've gone to a county council with more members. So we have 3 members, and this year 2 of our longtime Democratic county commissioners are retiring. And just 2 years ago, 1 Democrat lost in the general election and was replaced by a so-called independent. Now this year, Kelsey and I, both of our opponents in the general election, are calling themselves independent and talking about the hardest right that you can possibly imagine for what is really one of the most progressive counties in Thurston County. So I think it's really important for people to understand that the balance of power in Thurston County is really hanging with a big threat to it right now. And if Kelsey and I don't both win, we'll see some huge setbacks in the areas of the environment, public health, probably law and justice. Both of our opponents are retired police officers. So I just want to make sure I say that up front so people are kind of aware of how important it is this year. As for what a county commissioner does, you're responsible for everything that a city is as far as roads and policing, only for the unincorporated areas of the county. But then countywide, the county does everything like we have the assessor's office, the treasurer's office, the coroner's office. And the county commissioner does the budgets for all of those, including the county sheriff. And then the county board of commissioners is also the board of health for Thurston County. So they're responsible for all of the restaurant inspections and the public health and mental health system, the substance abuse and violence prevention and treatment system. So they have a pretty significant role, and they're the legislative branch and the executive branch in some ways, and sometimes they even play a judicial role in some land use decisions. So it's a big job. They annually pass about a $325 million budget and try to provide the right services to the county, most of which are prescribed by state law. So the county's real job is to implement state law. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no. It was a great answer. So one of the things that really first made you stand out to me, Jim, was you gave a speech back at, I believe it was the Thurston County Convention. It may have been the LD2 convention. And you had brought up some numbers that were staggering to me about the poverty in Thurston County and how it really is a way bigger issue than things seem in Thurston County. It's not necessarily known as a poverty-riddled area, but it really is. Can you talk a little bit about that and a $15 an hour minimum wage and those sort of things for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my work at United Way, we commissioned a study with Rutgers University back in New Jersey called ALICE, which is Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed. And we looked at every county, every city, and every census tract in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho to essentially analyze the working poor and compare the cost of living to the federal poverty line, which, if you don't know, the federal poverty line was established in 1974, the year I was born. Based on groceries being the cost of 1/3 of an average household income. It hasn't been changed. And so when we looked at the cost of living, for instance, in Thurston County, you find that the federal poverty line is about 15%, like it is statewide. But when you look at the real costs for housing, transportation, childcare, healthcare, taxes, you find that the people who are struggling to get by countywide are actually about 30%. And when you drill into some of our South County communities, our more rural communities, you're seeing upwards of 50 or 60% of the folks being ALICE, which is a combination of the poverty line plus the people who are living right on the threshold of being able to get by. So 50% of our community in some places, really not being able to, one broken down car or one broken appliance away from not being able to feed their kids or possibly even losing their home. And so for me, that's the kind of thing that motivates me to serve my community. I think that the opportunity gap, if you will, in the United States has gotten too large, and we really need to figure out a way to change the balance so that we can stabilize and grow the middle class. Frankly, that's the key to our country succeeding, I think, and especially our local community here in Thurston County. So a friend quoted this to me just recently: if the middle class is stable, the poor people can have mobility. And so we really have to have a solid middle class. And so in the city council, I've advocated for a $15 an hour minimum wage. But I've been really clear that that's not the only answer to anything. In fact, that's still not enough in almost any family in America. And so looking at doing economic development to make sure we're growing jobs, and then also making sure that we have the right social services and tax credits in place. I've been advocating to grow the earned income tax credit at the federal level and working on trying to get it funded in Washington State so that working families can have more opportunities to succeed. And I could talk about this all day, so let me pause and just kind of let you run the interview.
Well, yeah, no, that's fine, because actually, so a big thing we do on our show is we let viewers ask questions, and we try to ask the questions to the guests that we have on, and so it gives you an opportunity to win voters, Jim. So we have a question from Clay Johnson, who I know is a voter in Thurston County. And he said, what is the first step Jim is going to act on in order to make his plan come to fruition? How will he make it a reality?
I think the first thing in Thurston County is to make sure that we're working on economic development, and then that we have some work in place to make sure that we're not losing companies and make sure that we're attracting the right kinds of companies that have good living wage jobs. We also need to pay really close attention to the state in Thurston County. The number one employer in Thurston County is Washington State, and so when the state has a problem, it hits us really hard. I would compare it to the factories in the Midwest. If they cut staff, the towns dry up, and that's kind of the way Olympia and Thurston County are. So we got to make sure that we make and retain jobs, and that we also have the ability to work with our state government and try to influence its ability to be successful, because there aren't a lot of good progressive counties in Washington State, because the rural folks try to sort of trend the elected officials more towards the right than the broader population is, if that makes any sense at all. So that's my answer right now. But on top of all of that, we have to, bolster our mental health system. We have to make sure that we're not locking people up in prison when they have mental health issues, and make sure that people who aren't a threat to society are able to stay in their home and stay with their family. And that means expanding our options programs in the justice system so we can help people get rehabilitated or not put them in jail for silly things. that just cost us money and don't help anyone.
So just curious, are silly things marijuana? Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, it's interesting. So I spent about 8 years working in substance abuse and violence prevention work, and actually was I worked against the privatization of liquor, and I didn't really get involved in the marijuana legalization. But one thing I did have the opportunity to do was look around and see who's in jail and talk to sheriffs and police chiefs around Western Washington, who's in jail for marijuana alone. And that was actually pretty rare. Most of the time they're putting people in jail with, you know, possession charge as a secondary charge, and they found some other reason to keep them in jail. But yes, you know, there is no reason in my mind to lock anyone up for possession. And in this day and age, there's really not a reason to be enforcing very much of the federal marijuana law. I've been kind of discouraged about some of the things I've been hearing in the last several weeks since July 1st, when the medical system changed over to the state run.
Yes,
that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about that soon, because I've been frontline to that and it's been horrible. But it actually was kind of, this interview worked out well because we had another question. They kind of made some comments, so I'm assuming their question was about locking people up for marijuana. So another thing that I would like to personally, that's a big issue for me, is clean energy, and I don't know if that is something that the commissioner can influence. So if it's not, if you could at least speak to your opinion on that, and if it is something the commissioner can influence, what can the commissioner do to work Thurston County towards a clean energy future?
Yeah, definitely. So we have some influence, and I think that there's probably more influence we could have if we really pushed the limits on public health, because I think it's about time to declare, you know, our environment is in a public health crisis when it comes to global warming. And so with that, we have energy problems with too much carbon, and then we also have sea level rise. And so those are both huge threats to the government as well as to the broader community. The predictions we're getting is that we need to be able to protect all of our infrastructure from up to 6-foot floods in any low-lying area. So even away from the water, we have the issue with the sea level rise. But back to your original question, I'm an advocate for having the county develop a countywide energy plan that's sustainable and hopefully locally owned and operated over a 30 or a 50-year period. Not talking about establishing a power company, but talking about a good plan where first the county looks at its own energy waste and production to find out how it can produce its own energy from its own work. One of the keys to that is building a new county courthouse. We have a building that's built in the 1970s. A new courthouse could pay for itself in 30 to 50 years and not be wasting the kind of energy that it is now. And then once we have our own house in order, we look out, or at the same time, if we have the resources, and work with the broader community to look for incentives for using clean energy, for developing your own power on site, and then begin to have conversations about the regulatory approach to get there. Because the reality is that, and I don't have the specific numbers in front of me, but in the documents that we signed, at least in the city of Olympia and the Paris Accord for climate change, we have to get back to pre-1990 levels of carbon emissions in about 10 years. And it's a significant change. And we're going to have a dramatic shift in culture for how we think about energy, how we act around energy. And frankly, to me, the key of that is getting as many cars off the road as possible, because that's the place where we're spewing awful stuff into the sky that's making it hard for kids to grow up healthy and hard for us to combat the crisis that's affecting our globe.